Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Wild Tomorrow Fun tonight for our live stream event focused on the hyena. We'll be talking about their fascinating traits and why they aren't just the evil, scavenging villains that you see in The Lion King. Tonight, our ecologist Axel Hunnicutt will tell you why he loves hyena, so much so that he's doing his PhD research about them, and his nickname is Hyena Man. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Wendy Hapgood, and I'm one of the co-founders of Wild Tomorrow Fund, based in New York City. Wild Tomorrow Fund is a wildlife conservation charity based both here in New York and on the ground in South Africa. Our mission is to save wildlife and wild places, including habitat for many species of wildlife, including elephants, lions, leopards, rhinos, and of course, the hyena. So before I introduce you to Axel, for those of you in the audience that are joining us live tonight on YouTube or on Facebook, please, as we're talking and as Axel's telling you all about hyena, we'd love to see your comments and questions coming up in the feed, and we'll be able to share them with Axel and also in Q&A later. So let's bring in Axel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We're so excited to talk about my favorite topic, which is spotted hyenas. And I think we're going to cover a range of topics from the history of the hatred, why we hate hyenas, how far back that goes, why it's so systemic in even our culture, talk a little bit about the amazing facts and truths of hyenas and why I hope that, or I'm pretty sure they're going to be your new favorite animal. And then we'll go into a little bit of the research that we're doing on the ground in South Africa to try to help hyena conservation. So I think first, I just wanted to share with you first, there's more than one hyena. There are actually 4 different species of hyena. There is the striped hyena, which is found in East and North Africa and across the Arabian Peninsula and into large parts of Asia. And then we also have the brown hyena, which is restricted to Southern Africa, so Namibia, Botswana, South Africa. Then we have the maned hyena. This is probably the least known of the 4. The maned hyena is also known as the Aardwolf. It's an insectivorous hyena, so it mostly eats insects. It's very small, unlike the other ones. And then we have probably the most conspicuous, which is the spotted hyena. And the spotted hyena is what we'll mostly be focusing on tonight because, well, that's the species that I've been studying for the last 6 years.
We're super excited, Axel, to talk all about hyena. But before we get into the detail, we'd love to do a bit of a poll. And I also wanted to say that we had, a few email messages coming in before tonight from people in our supporters who actually love hyena, and we're really excited to be a part of like a talk that was focused on the hyena. So not everybody loves to hate hyena. But yeah, we were wondering, we thought we'd poll the audience first, with a bit of a word association, if you guys could think and just type in the comments, when we say the word hyena, when you hear the word hyena, what do you think of? Like, what kind of traits do you think of?
Yeah, there's definitely, when people, even if they've never been to Africa or other parts of the world where they've seen species of hyenas, it seems like almost everyone has something that they associate with them. They have a preconceived notion of them.
Mm-hmm. We have one coming. It's funny. This is from Charles. Hi, Charles. He says, when he hears the word hyena, he definitely thinks of Axel. Yeah, me too. And then actually Laura, who's someone who loves hyena, thinks of that they laugh.
We've got scavenger. That's definitely something that a lot of people, it's one of the first things that they pick up on or claim that they're scavengers. We've got some people saying powerful strength, precious material, and of course the Lion King is coming through quite a bit. So keep them coming, because it's very interesting to see.
Fish, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see what people think. But traditionally, and it's even coming through in the comments, yeah, you hear a lot about hyenas are scavengers. They're ugly, they're malicious, they're cowardly, they're conniving, they're gluttonous, and they're greedy. And we can still see there's some more coming through. Scavenger is coming up a lot. And The Lion King, it's without fail, The Lion King, every time I give a talk, comes up when I usually ask people, what do you think about hyenas? The Lion King is usually one of the first things that's brought to mind. And there's good reason. The Lion King came out in, The Lion King came out in 1994. It's a Disney animated film. At the time, it was yeah, I mean, it really galvanized a generation of hyena haters. And the reason is because if you don't know the story, the hyenas are sort of they're the main villain, they're the henchmen. And there's these three main hyenas that sort of drive the main character and chase him around. And they're portrayed as being stupid and evil and gluttonous. And there's even a scene in the movie where they're portrayed as being these mindless, militaristically goose stepping like Nazis to a musical number. So it really did quite a lot to the hyena image. And last year, the 20th anniversary of The Lion King came out, and that is the only movie that so far has topped the original 1994 one as far as being one of the highest grossing animated films. It's also, if you've seen it on Broadway, it's a very popular Broadway show. In fact, it's the third longest running and the highest grossing Broadway musical. So it's fascinating to see that the antagonist of this story is prevalent within our society, and we don't, especially here in the United States, we don't have hyenas, not anymore.
Right.
So it's really fascinating to see that storyline carries through and continues. And 1994, I was watching that as a kid, and I remember not liking hyenas. So it really galvanized a whole generation of people that disliked them and feared them.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's why I loved our event image so much, because it shows a different side of the hyena. I'm just going to put it up here. This was a hyena pup or cub, I think. Yeah, I mean, and it's one of the cutest photos of a hyena that I've ever seen. It was taken by our wildlife photographer friend and ambassador, Shannon Wild, who many of you I know and love. And actually, I asked her before, it's too late in South Africa to have her come live, but I asked her to explain a little bit about that image and how it happened, how she was able to see this like capture this really great shots.
My friends at Wild Tomorrow Fund have asked for a little insight into the baby hyena photo that they posted recently, and also about why they are vilified and why we shouldn't vilify them. So to give you some background, the photo is this one, and it's of an adorable juvenile spotted hyena. I shot this in 2015 in Kruger National Park, and it just happened to be by the side of a road, resting in the shade. It was by itself, and it was very curious. It was at that age where it's not a baby anymore, but it's not quite an adult. So it was starting to explore a lot, and it actually came out onto the road. It smelt the tires. I watched it and photographed it actually go up to another vehicle that was nearby. So it was a little apprehensive, but definitely curious. And it reminds me of a young kid that's just starting to test their boundaries as well. So you get a sense of the size. It's quite small, but not a baby anymore. Their appearance as adults can be seen as not the cutest, but it's hard to deny that the young hyena in this picture in particular, and I'll bring it up again, is absolutely adorable. I mean, you can't get over, it looks like it's smiling. It's got a cheeky little grin, which I think is a great representation of its personality, but also those fluffy round ears and those huge eyes. Absolutely adorable. So, as part of the ecosystem, they play an important role. So it's not a matter of having a bad reputation and that we should just discount them. They're a really important part of the circle of life and a necessary part and something that we should definitely appreciate. So I hope you enjoyed a little insight into the background of shooting that photo.
That was great to hear from Shannon, and how lucky she was to come across that little, very cute hyena pup. And Axel actually has a question from Jesse. And for me too, looking at that cub reminds us a little bit of a puppy. Very cute. And are they related to dogs, or are they related to jackals, and what's the difference?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people think that hyenas are most closely related to dogs because they do have a very canine-like appearance. But the fact is, they're much more closely related to the cat family, the felid family. So they're more closely associated to cats. But actually, the family of mammals that they're most closely related to are the family that includes civets and genets, which are sort of like a mongoose-looking creature that occurs in Asia and Africa. So yeah, not dogs, but they've often been mistaken for wolves.
Amazing. And I don't know, I think some people also think they may be related to cats, and I love cats. Maybe that's why I love hyena too. It's fascinating talking about dogs and wolves. Humans have evolved together with dogs, and even potentially learned to hunt together cooperatively with wolves. Cats were revered by the pharaohs, who wrapped them up and took them to the afterlife as mummies with them. What's our history as humans together with hyena?
Yeah, no, so just like a lot of species, we have a very long and unique history and relationship with hyenas that goes back actually before our species, during the evolution of hominids and human-like species. In our evolution to becoming who we are now, we evolved alongside hyenas on the African plains. We competed with them for resources. We scavenged and fought off hyenas for carcasses. There's fossils of hyena dung going back 250,000 years of human hair being fossilized in that dung. So obviously hyenas scavenging and consuming humans during that time. There's evidence that they competed with Neanderthals over caves as den sites and homes. They competed with Cro-Magnons, and there's even just bring it up here. There's cave paintings going back 20,000 years in France that depict the Eurasian species, or it's actually a subspecies of the spotted hyena. It's the Eurasian spotted hyena, and that species actually was completely from the Iberian Peninsula into the British Isles all the way to Siberia. That's as far as they existed. So we were directly competing with hyenas during that time. And there's actually there's several papers and a lot of evidence that speak to the presence of hyenas being in eastern Siberia as actually a way of, it wasn't until those hyenas went extinct in that area that humans were actually able to cross the Bering Strait. So hyenas are actually holding us back at the time.
It's pretty amazing to see that there were some very, very distant ancestors of ours that loved hyenas enough to create works of art on cave walls. It's really amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's depictions, just like the cats with the pharaohs, there's depiction of hyenas that go back through ancient Egyptian times and beyond that. But looking into more recorded history, we have a long, the earliest records go back to the 5th century BC in classical Greece with Herodotus and the story of Hercules. Hundreds of years later, Aristotle is talking about hyenas in his History of Animals, and he described them much of the same way that we describe them now, or even in our lifetimes as being scavengers, grave robbers, that they could lure humans by producing human-like cries, that they were tricksters, and the fact that they could, the big one was that they were hermaphrodites. Aristotle was one of the first ones to say these animals shift sex, or they're two sexes in one at the same time. And that goes all the way through the medieval times, with the animals being called unclean and unholy, that they describe all 7 of the deadly sins, particularly gluttony and lust. There was this big thing about hyenas and their their sexual promiscuity with each other, and also being hermaphrodites, just the pure definition of an ungodly or an unclean animal. Writers talked about them as being this like Frankenstein-like animal. They were a mix of all the different unwanted parts. There's particularly during the Renaissance, there was still the issue that people were confusing them with wolves. They were still saying, well, they're just a spotted wolf. There's no difference. And if you know anything about the history of wolves in Europe and basically a millennia of hatred and trying to eradicate wolves to make Europe safe, that definitely didn't help their already long history of hatred and misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. So yeah, hyenas, I mean, it goes back and it continues. Hemingway wrote of them. Is Sir Walter Raleigh when he wrote about the Noah's Ark, he intentionally removed hyenas and said that God wouldn't allow them on the ark and they would have to drown in the floods because they were an ugly creature, a mixed race. It continues. This brings us into about the 1800s where, European imperialism into Asia and Africa, and you have obviously explorers, writers, hunters, naturalists, and of course missionaries going into these parts of going deeper into Africa and actually seeing these animals, and their depictions of them aren't any greater. I mean, they talk of them being cowardly, unworthy to hunt, or to be hunted, and particularly that they're these ghoulish creatures and they're foolish. And then obviously those people brought back a lot of the, just like all the other creatures that they were finding, they were bringing them back into zoos and menageries in Europe and in the United States. And hyenas, which we'll talk about in a second, being very clever, are very good at escaping from zoos. And there's, around the turn of the century, there's a lot of newspaper articles that come out about hyenas that escape from local zoos, both in Europe and across the United States. And they evade capture, and at night you can hear this eerie howl or whoop that comes across the landscape. And on numerous occasions, where did they find them? Well, they found them in the graveyards, digging up old carcasses and eating the bones.
Yes.
So
I guess they were hungry, right? They're good scavengers.
So yeah, I mean, it goes back a long way, and up until it really wasn't until about the 1970s that researchers in the field started revealing some of the truths behind what was really happening and who these species actually were and what their interesting and fascinating biology was that explained a lot of these misconceptions.
And actually, we had a question from Bonnie Wiper, who has an amazing organization called Thinking Animals. And you may be going to get to this later, but is it after the 70s that there started to be studies more on their behavior and the kind of deeper understanding?
No, definitely. I mean, after Hans Kruk, who was a Dutch biologist that went to Tanzania to study some of the largest densities and clans of hyenas, and he was the one that really, he's called the godfather of hyenas and the grandfather of hyenas, and he really, started to, he wrote the book on them, is what they say. He really showed the complex society that these hyenas have. They're extremely complex individuals, an extremely complex species. And obviously that led to then years of cognitive studies and behavioral studies, which we'll get into in a bit. But yeah, I mean, there's so much work that can be done on them.
Yeah, we need more hyena men. We need to clone you out there in the field. Something I think most people already know about hyena, even the kind of people that really don't know much about a hyena, is they know that they laugh. Is that true? And Axel, what does it mean? Is it like when a dog barks, they're happy, or what does the laugh of a hyena mean?
Yeah, actually, let me bring. I have one here. So hyenas do laugh, and as I mentioned, they have. Let's go make it just a little bit. almost makes you want to laugh along. You know what they say, when you laugh long enough, when you fake laugh, you actually start to laugh.
That was
find
pretty
that with
awesome.
hyenas. But it's actually not a laugh. That's one of the many vocalizations that spotted hyenas have. And it actually has more to do with social anxiety. So they do that when they're in like an unsure situation, if there's predators around, or they're in a group of them, and they're just unsure of what's going on. So that's them being like trying to reestablish who they are. The other, they have over 11 calls that they do, and they're actually they are the most vocal of the large carnivores. But the one that anyone that's been to Africa that has heard them will probably hear the whoop. So that's one of Africa's most iconic nighttime noises, is that whoop, much like a wolf's howl. It carries extremely long distances. It codes for their name and their rank. So other individuals that are hearing that are saying, "Oh, that's Susan or David, and she's in my clan or she's not in my clan." So that goes, yeah.
And Axel, when you're out in the field, do you get to start to recognize the calls who Susan?
You can. You actually.
Yes, I know
can.
that's Susan he's calling now. Hurry up,
Yeah,
Susan.
I think definitely when I was doing my master's, you could start to pick up on the tone and intonation. You can definitely very clearly hear the age of the individual in the whoop, and then you can actually start to learn them. So there's a couple of them that I knew.
Do you have a hyena impression that you're willing to share?
I do. I might just save that for the end. So,
okay. And it's actually really interesting to me. We have a Wild Tomorrow Fun YouTube channel. We don't have a huge number of views for our videos. Hopefully it's going to increase. But the video with the most views happens to be audio. It's just audio of a hyena call-up, which is the audio that Axel uses when he's trying to bring the hyena in for his study. So yeah, I guess a lot of people out there are fascinated and haven't had the chance to hear the hyena sound. So it's a popular resource on our YouTube channel.
No, it's great. And, I think that's one of the things that people, it's just one of the things that we don't, unless you're actually studying them or you're reading about them, which not a lot of people do. It's one of the amazing facts about hyenas is that they're extremely vocal. And they use that is used because of their social complexity. Hyenas, they really themselves in their PR image. In addition to everything we just spoke about, hyenas can look kind of manky sometimes. They don't always look like they're having the best hair day. They do get in a lot of scruffs. This was a female that was in one of my study areas. Her name was Olga. She was 17 years old. And she had lost most of her lips, which didn't make her the prettiest, the prettiest in some of our eyes. And then also, hyenas, they've been perceived as being gluttonous, and you could quantify that. They can consume up to a third of their body mass in a sitting. That's about 30 pounds of flesh. And they're not afraid to get dirty. Very often we see them in carcasses like this one. This is a hyena that was inside a rhino carcass when I got there. I've seen videos of hyenas inside elephant carcasses, and I think a lot of people that have been on safaris have probably seen hyenas pop out of any number of things. When it comes to food, hyenas really don't have any qualms.
Do you know, Axel, why it is that, this is a question from Valentina, why their legs are longer in the front? They kind of look a little unbalanced,
Yeah, exactly. And that was something that a number of writers, even Hemingway wrote about. It's just this ungangly creature and this uneven, disproportioned animal. But they have a sloping back. And the reason for that is because they have such a massive neck and a large head, which contains all those muscles. Obviously, the head for their massive bite force and strength, the masseter muscles, the biting muscles. Their head is very large, and obviously because of that, bite force needs to be quite heavy and powerful to take the force. And then the neck itself, the neck is extremely wide and thick and just full of muscles, and that's for ripping into carcasses. We've seen hyenas that kill Nyala antelope in our area, which are quite a large antelope, and about this larger than a white-tailed deer. And they will, after they eat it, if it's by itself or it needs to get away, it'll just lift that up in its mouth and walk on all fours without being on balance. So actually their front legs are longer and more robust to actually withhold all that strength that's in the front and actually hold them upright.
Wow, that's amazing. And it is a question that maybe people don't want to ask, but I'll ask it for them. Do female hyena have a penis?
They have a pseudo penis. I'll actually show you now. So this is obviously probably the number one thing that hyenas have been chasticated for. And yeah, hyenas have a pseudo penis. So the females have their clitoris has evolved to their entire urogenital tract runs through it. So they urinate through it, they have sex through it, they give birth through it. It becomes erect, much like a penis, and it's actually larger than the hyena's male penis because he actually has to be inserted into it. And it's actually the only species of mammal that can't be raped because she has to be flaccid. And hyenas get these erections. It's not a sexual thing unless they're actually in intercourse, which we don't see very often. But they get these erections as a sign of, it's a social display. So for instance, in this picture here, this is a submissive individual that's displaying its erection, and the other individual goes and puts its mouth up to it and sniffs. And you can see this other animal is also starting to get one. It's quite a bit younger, and he or she will do the same thing. These are actually both females. They also have a fake set of testicles. So they have a pseudoscrotum. So you can see here, this is the male on the right with an actual penile sheath. And then this is the female on the left. So she has a fake set of testicles, and this is her clitoral sheath, or it's basically where her clitoris comes out and looks just like a male's. So this has obviously caused a lot of confusion, naturalists, and obviously a lot of the first naturalists being missionaries and clergymen were utterly disgusted by spotted hyenas. And yeah, it didn't go over well in the original books. And even up until the 70s, it was still misunderstood. So
you can understand why there were so many crazy stories about a hyena across the ages. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, you can just imagine. And that story of them being even 2 years ago, I had a guide in South Africa ask me if they were actually hermaphrodites or at what point they switched male to female. And that's in 2018. So I think there still is a lot of misunderstanding. And here's a video of them doing, so this is every day when they come in contact with each other. The first time they see each other, they'll up to each other and they'll do that social display. It's like a 69, head to tail. And basically it's them showing their most vulnerable parts to the most powerful part. It really is just, this is who I am. I'm showing you, I'm allowing you to display your dominance over me. And they greet each other every day and then they move on. Hyena sex is also extremely challenging because of that, because her pseudo penis is where the male's penis would be. It's much farther underneath. It's on her ventral side. So he has to scoop up underneath her in order to actually insert himself inside there. And because of that, hyenas practice this from, even as young as a few weeks old. You see the play mounting, they get erections, they try to mount each other. They do it all the time around the den. And so because of that, that was another thing that, the original naturalists that were going and seeing these animals were saying, geez, even the young babies are trying to have sex with each other. And that's where this promiscuity really came up.
It's really fascinating. And you must have some really interesting videos from the dens over time. Axel's put a lot of camera traps out as part of his research. We had an interesting question, Axel. I hadn't heard this one before. Is their fur toxic to touch? Is that a myth?
No, well, it's not toxic, but I actually forgot to touch on the local beliefs of hyenas, which is that across most African cultures, I can't speak on the Asian side with striped hyenas, but definitely with spotted hyenas across African cultures, it's believed that hyenas, it's very similar to how we traditionally see them as being that they're vilified. But in addition, there's a respect for their strength and power. And this has to do with the belief or understanding that hyenas are involved in the afterlife, and that hyenas remove everything from the environment, all the carcasses, all the dead animals, and take them to the underworld. And that includes people. And there's even cultures in Central and East Africa that actually leave their dead out and allow the hyenas to come and take them and eat them. And where we work in Zululand, the traditional Zulu belief is that hyenas transform back and forth from witches, and that witches actually ride hyenas instead of broomsticks. They ride around on hyenas. So they're strongly associated with witchcraft and magic. But yeah, the hyena tail is traditionally used in a lot of cultures. It's burnt, and it's thought that it will actually make everyone go to sleep. So maybe that's where the toxic fur is, or maybe that's where that concept is coming from. But yeah, it's, to my knowledge, there's actually no toxins that are found in the hyena's fur or cape.
Amazing. And Axel, can you tell us about, there's, this idea that there's scavengers, but actually they're hunters too. I mean, that's something I think is quite surprising. Can you talk us through that? And how
definitely.
How do they compare to lions, the king?
Yeah, no, so hyenas are, this is where we get to the truths, revealing the truths of hyenas. They're actually really beautiful animals. And when you actually see them in the right light, in the right context, they are, nothing short of beautiful. And they're extremely, as I mentioned, complex animals. They're very social. They're definitely one of the most social large carnivores. They live in groups that are between 3 and 130 in size that are called clans. They're extremely socially complex in their ranking structure. The females are the dominant individuals. Males hold the rank just below their mother, and then they leave their clan at the age of 2 and they go and join another clan, and they start all the way down at the bottom. So actually a lot like postmodern dating in our world. The longer a hyena has a relationship with a female, the more likely he is to actually get somewhere with her and build a relationship with her. The stronger the relationship is, the more likely they are to bond and procreate. But the other thing is that hyenas are extremely long living for large carnivores. They could live to be upwards of 25 in captivity. In the wild, a little over 20, which is quite, if you're looking at lions and other large cats, usually getting over 10 to 13 is quite old for a cat like a lion, definitely 13 to 14. So these animals, they live a long time, they're very social, and they're very intelligent. When it comes to, here's a video of them actually. This is a hyena named Jerry. He's the one with the collar there. And we found him in the middle of the sand forest one night, just having a complete powwow with some of these little teenage hyenas. It's almost like a gang of them.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's extremely important for them to constantly reaffirm their bonds, constantly remind each other their ranks, and play is very important as well. But when it comes, you mentioned hunting, hyenas are extremely successful hunters. It's for the long time, scavenger came up quite a bit on the post here. Hyenas are actually very efficient hunters, and they're only second to African wild dogs. Hyenas can hunt by themselves. They can hunt in small groups, or they can hunt as an entire pack, or an entire clan rather. And they're actually better hunters than lions, which has led to some of the confusion around hyenas actually competing with them. So the other thing is that, a group of hyenas can consume a carcass in 30 minutes or so. Wow. As I mentioned earlier, they can eat about a third of their body weight in a single sitting, and they eat extremely quickly as well. And they gorge themselves until they're completely barrel bellied. So, a group of hyenas can consume a carcass very quickly, whereas a pride of lions will sit on it for a couple of days. And that was another thing that confused some of the early naturalists traveling to Africa, was that they never saw hyenas hunt, and they rarely saw them on carcasses that they thought that they killed. They always thought that there was lions around. And that is largely because lions have traditionally come in and the two of them have actually interacted a lot as far as stealing each other's kills. But some of the original work that was done showed that lions actually scavenge more from hyenas in a lot of places. Not everywhere, but because lions are far less of an efficient hunter, they would rather it's easier for them just to follow hyena clans around and scavenge from them. So the whole original Lion King twist, the noble, regal, righteous lion against the villainous hyena, isn't exactly what we see in the wild. And in fact, when we actually better understand these two apex predators that sit at the very top together, they're actually the lion is not the king of the African savannah. The lion is in constant competition with the spotted hyena, and they actually sit at the same rank, and they're constantly competing with each other, even killing each other. It's almost like a proto-genocide, like a pan-species genocidal war that's been going on for ages between them.
Yeah, and somehow they got left out as the the hero of the movies, like the lions. They got to be, they often seem to be the bad boys. There's a nice message came in from Andy who said he remembers coming to see you, Axel, in KwaZulu-Natal and being part of a collaring. So what a nice memory.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll be talking about that later. We'll be showing some videos of us, some photos of us actually collaring the animals in the research that we do. That's great to see. Thanks, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I could go on and on about why hyenas are actually cool. But the one thing I was going to say here is that the one person, I spoke about a lot of people that have chastised hyenas over the ages, but one person who actually acknowledged the relationship between hyenas and lions was Teddy Roosevelt, who, when coming to Africa, actually said, wow, these animals, they're actually brave enough to stand up against lions. There's nothing else that will do that. Unfortunately, it didn't stop him from hunting them or writing other bad things about them later. But he was one of the first potential hyena lovers, or at least acknowledgers of their cool deeds.
I mean, I would say, oh, that's so cute. I was going to say one of the things that I get really excited about is when we get pictures on our camera traps of the hyena. We're really lucky, for those of you in the audience that know Wild Tomorrow Fund well, we have 2 wildlife reserves or land that we've been saving as part of our habitat protection mission. We're creating a wildlife corridor in KwaZulu-Natal, and it's very exciting to explore the biodiversity that's there. And one way we do that is with camera traps. And seeing the hyena pop up, and understanding that they are there at our reserves is pretty amazing. I think, Axel, you have some pictures of that too. Oh, there we are.
Yeah, so this is a hyena that actually came up last week actually very close to my house, although I'm in Oregon at the moment, very close to my house in South Africa. And yeah, hyenas are very, they're definitely the species of large carnivore in Africa that is very resistant to human pressure. They're able to live in areas where human density has thrown out almost all other species. Hyenas still persist. Yet, with this continued negative perception of them, an ever-growing increase of the human population, and an ever-fragmenting wildlife, our wilderness and natural habitat where these animals occur, corridors are becoming more and more necessary for their survival. And we see that in a lot of the work and research that we've been doing where we're starting to see that this human pressure is actually too much. Here's just a map of the area that we work in. Our nature reserves are down here, and our work is mostly based around Phinda, Mkuzi, in this area. And you can see it's a very fragmented landscape. It's not continuous. And in these white spaces are local people that are living there. There's cattle farms, there's livestock. So there's a lot of pressure in this area. And we're even starting, this is something that's been going on for quite a long time. This might be difficult to see or to actually see emotionally, but this is a snare wound that's around this animal's neck. And this is something that we've seen quite a bit in the research that we've done, is that hyenas actually getting caught in these wire noose snares, which are set by poachers. Now, they're not trying to catch the hyenas, they're trying to catch other species like antelope. They're actually trying to get meat. But what happens is that an antelope goes into that, starts, it tugs on it, and it gets caught like a noose, and that animal will bleed out. And and start to moan, and hyenas will come in and try to actually, then eat that animal, but get caught in all the other snares. So we've removed quite a few snares around animals' necks. Luckily, as we were mentioning earlier, with hyenas having such a thick neck, they usually survive. In one study we did in the area, we found that 1 in 3 hyenas actually had a snare around its neck or had a snare wound around it. Because they have such powerful jaws, they can actually usually cut them off themselves or break them off. But sometimes when they're wire ones like that, it's quite difficult.
And Axel, in that video, the hyena is sedated, right? It's been
yes. Yeah, this is an animal that we immobilized. We darted it, and then we were able to. Yeah, sorry, it is alive. She woke up and she was fine. Actually, she was seen just the other day. Someone sent me some pictures of her around the reserve, which is great to see.
Yeah, and speaking of those snares, you seeing them in the hands of the rangers is like really a good thing to see. And at our Mfuleni Reserve, which we only took management of in July, so it's a new protected area, a new habitat for a lot of wildlife. How many snares have our guys taken out so far, Axel, in like less than 6 months?
It's been about 350. No, we'll be just shy of 400 now. I didn't check them this morning, but yeah, about just under 400.
This is a 1,000 acres in Africa size, relatively small, but to pull out, hundreds, 300 snares in that one small piece just shows you how much of an issue snaring is in Africa for hyena and many other species.
Snaring is an issue in our area, but the work that we've been doing, my master's work up until 2017, we were looking at, what was actually going on with the hyena population in our area. We suspected that there was going to be a lot of snaring, but we weren't sure if that was actually going to be a major driver in their population dynamics. What we found is that the population was actually falling quite a bit. And when we actually look at how we classify animals, from the right here being least concern, that's an animal that really isn't at risk at being going extinct, all the way over here to extinction. This is critically endangered, and vulnerable. So hyenas have traditionally been a least concern, one of the large predators in the world that's always been least concern. We haven't really had to worry about them. They're usually in large numbers. They're extremely successful. They're found across Africa, across sub-Saharan Africa, usually in large numbers. Like I mentioned, they can exist outside of protected areas. But what we started to find is that hyenas are becoming more and more reliant on these protected areas and are actually declining outside of them in a lot of regions. And in our area as well, we were actually found that hyenas were in decline even within the parks. And that was, we attributed that somewhat to the persecution of these animals. And a lot of the local farmers and local landowners in the area don't share the same views that we have of hyenas, although I credit them, a lot of them do as well, but they do have to make a livelihood. And hyenas don't respect, by and large, don't respect the fencing that has now come across Africa. So we find hyenas across, it's mostly restricted to the Kruger National Park area here in South Africa. But this is where we are on the coast. There is a small pocket of them. And when you actually start looking at the numbers of hyenas outside of that one park, Kruger, they actually are quite small. And we've actually been trying to put together a national forum to actually start managing hyenas, coordinating research, trying to get accurate numbers on them, and trying to move animals that are around these areas, these livestock areas, so that they're not conflict animals. In 2018, we formed the Manyuwana Conservancy Spotted Hyena Project. So we actually put a label on the research we were doing in the region. And that was a partnership between the Manyuwana Conservancy and Beyond Pinda Private Game Reserve, where we were based, and Wild Tomorrow Fund. And when we found out that the hyenas were in decline, the next step was to see, okay, well, maybe we need to see how them moving outside of the park was actually influencing their mortality rates and their survival probability. So the best way to do that is to put a collar on them and see where they go. So put GPS collars on them. So we were able to get a grant from the Oak Foundation, and we were able to start to collar them. But how do you get a collar on a hyena? Well, luckily hyenas love food. So you could usually find carcasses in the field, and then we would go at night with a veterinarian and then dart the animals. And then once they're sedated, we would be able to then go over and do what we need to do, which is to, here's a video of one that got darted in the rump. This is all through our night vision monocles. A lot of the equipment that's been donated next to our great donors at Wild Tomorrow Fund. You can see the dart in the rump of that hyena. So we're monitoring it. We have a veterinarian there as well who's watching through his monocle. And within 6 minutes, this animal is flat on the ground, and we're able to safely approach it.
And Axel, don't you have a secret weapon when it comes to bringing hyenas in? What's your secret sauce?
Sriracha mayo seems to work really well. Really anything that's really smelly. So usually like mixing up curry powder, and this is if you don't have a carcass and you really need to make a plan. So I like mixing up sriracha mayo, some eggs, a little bit of off mince meat, and just throw that around, and that keeps them. That seems to work. We actually used that recently with there were some people in just outside Kruger National Park that were trying to catch 2 snared hyenas last week, and we were giving them advice here and trying to walk them through a little, giving them some ideas. And the sriracha mayo came up. They wanted the recipe.
Wow.
So
Charles is suggesting some Old Spice, but I don't know about that.
Yeah. It's funny though, because hyenas, they do have such an incredible sense of smell. They can smell carcasses from up to 10 kilometers. It's about 7 miles away. And I remember when I first started studying them, I was very concerned about not how I smelled, but at least that I smelled consistent. So I tried to maintain a level of hygiene, but I was very concerned about the type of deodorant and using it consistently, especially when working close to the animals' dens. But getting back to how we actually catch them, this is us actually collaring them, and we would fit the GPS collar, and then there was a number, because we're actually we're putting these animals at risk every time we immobilize them. We're giving them a sedative, a tranquilizer. Immobilizing them puts them at risk. So we want to take as much data as possible. So we took measurements of their teeth, their bodies, their dental measurements tell us a lot about their age. You can see this is quite an old individual.
Very yellow teeth.
Oh yeah, this is this kinesial teeth, this kinesial premolar. There's massive wear on that. That's the region where they actually will crush bones. This first molar and this premolar here. That's where that 1,100 pounds of force, that 1,100 psi. That's where that bone crushing force comes in. This is a younger individual.
Whiter teeth.
Yeah, much whiter, a lot less tartar. But we take measurements, we weigh them, and we've been lucky enough to have groups of researchers come out and help us with this. This is Sue Orloff and her group from Biologists Without Borders, who have been great supporters of the project. There's Sue there. Give her a shout out.
And Sue, we know you're watching. Hello to you and Annie.
Yeah, so this was great. We had some people, and mentioning Hans Crook, this gentleman here actually worked with Hans Crook, just to point that out. But once the collar is on and we have the measurements we need and we've taken our cool photos, we wake the animals up, and they're on their way in a matter of time. And, having the collars on has allowed us to have such an amazing insight into not just the areas that these animals use, but what they're eating, where their den sites are. We've been able to locate dens that we didn't even know about, ones that I would walk by every day because of the collars. And this allows us to, track cub mortality, the rate in which cubs are being born, their survival probability. And it also allows us to track individuals and how they're related to each other and their ranks. So the population that we study is actually probably one of the best studied populations in Southern Africa, because we've been doing it for about 6.5 years. And luckily, since 2017, 2016, when we first got those numbers about population decline over the last 6 years before that, the population has since rebounded. And this in part is due to the efforts of people in the area who, Pinda Private Game Reserve, organizations like Wild Tomorrow Fund that have actually secured properties that were previously hunting farms or weren't directly in line with the conservation goals in the area. And those areas have since allowed the expansion of spotted hyena range to continue and the population to rebound. It's removed a lot of the edge effects in the area.
And actually, that was half of the question that Jesse asked about the population and the reasons for decline. Are they also found in the illegal wildlife trade? Is that an issue for hyena?
Yeah, there is. Even in our area, we've picked up on, as I mentioned, the local beliefs that hyenas, are involved in witchcraft and have magical powers in some ways, and especially relating to their genitals and the transformation. So yeah, you do find, I've met with several sangomas in our region. Those are local traditional healers who have said that they do use parts, and there is a trade for hyena parts, particularly their pelts, their tails, and their teeth in particular.
This has all been fascinating, Charles, and I want to, Axel, get a chance to put some more questions from our amazing viewers on the screen. Yeah. One comment from Joy is that actually Old Spice, they do use that as carnivore enrichment in zoos. So you may want to actually test that out in the field and let Joy know how the hyenas like you with the Old Spice.
Give it a try.
Yeah.
I should switch over to Old Spice.
And I think we saw some pictures of the cubs, and Bonnie's asking, are they born black?
Yes. So here, let me bring that up. So yeah, hyenas are born jet black, chocolate black when they're born. Mm-hmm. You can see this is the older individual that's there. He's probably about 9 to 12 months old. But these cubs are probably only about 2 weeks old. Wow. And this actually something I was going to talk about was how hyenas, a lion cub of that age would be blind and completely useless, just, like most cats, just saying this. So hyenas are born advancedly developed, and they're actually able to even kill each other within the first few hours of birth. And that has to do with them sorting out the social ranks between them, because they take the rank directly below their mother. And it's the milk, it's the quality of the milk in hyenas that allows them to grow quickly, but is also the reason why they're so dependent on it for so long. Spotted hyena milk is actually the most protein rich of all the terrestrial carnivores, and second in fat content only to polar bears and fur seals, if I remember correctly.
It's a pretty amazing fact. And actually, did you mention the other amazing fact about hyena that I think about is that they can count?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, hyenas are extremely intelligent, and they can count. They actually have a quite highly developed frontal cortex, which is probably one of the reasons why they have such a high level of social intelligence. And there's even been a number of studies, going back to a question that was asked earlier, there's been a number of studies in labs, particularly at the University of Michigan and UCLA Berkeley, that there's been a lot of work done on their social cooperation and intelligence, and in studies that have been done on, can hyenas both pull, joint tasks, cooperative tasks, and they actually outcompete most of the large primates, including chimpanzees, on that. So this cooperative intelligence is something that hyenas they even surpass chimps on. It's pretty cool.
That is amazing. Actually, we have another question from Bonnie, which I think is really relevant to today and the COVID crisis and what that impact has been on Africa in terms of just like New York, everything shut down, including all tourism, all lodges, and all the revenue. Have you heard that has had an impact on poaching? I mean, for hyena, but really for all animals in reserves in Africa, in South Africa.
Yeah, well, we've seen just in the last few weeks, South Africa is in a complete lockdown. So South Africa is actually the country that has probably the highest level of quarantine. People, you need to have a permit to be on a public road. That's how intense it is. So because of that, in some areas, there actually has been a decrease in poaching, just because there really is a lot of, movement has really been shut down quite a bit. But locally, particularly on our reserves and in our areas, areas where local people live directly next to the reserves, there's been an increase. And definitely on our reserves, we've seen an increase in meat poaching, increase in snaring. And, you can't blame the people. They're already, unemployment is so high, and now they aren't able to even move from their homes. So they are coming out and looking for sources of food. And that's why Wild Tomorrow Fund has actually been assisting with food programs into the communities and actually, giving those people another option that they don't have to poach.
Yeah. Was there any, we're kind of heading close to 7, and was there anything, Axel, about, I mean, there are so many amazing facts about hyena. Are there any really important ones that we've forgotten that you'd like to make sure we get in before we say goodnight?
Yeah, I mean, the real thing is just that hyenas they're amazing individuals. They're amazing creatures. They're intelligent. They're complex. They're fantastic mothers. When it comes to the amount of energy that's actually expended per cub, hyenas exert the most. They don't cross-suckle. A mother will invest so much time and so much energy, especially that highly nutritious milk that she has to produce. They're just, if you name a thing that hyenas have been labeled for in the wrong way, we can find a fact, and we can find a research project that's probably looked into it and proved that it's otherwise. A lot of people have pointed to this greater kind of intelligence that is found in great apes, cetaceans and whales, and elephants. And it's been postulated that hyenas are potentially the fourth in that. They actually are extremely intelligent individuals. And when you see them, when you actually see them for yourself, it's hard not to see that. It's not hard to see an animal that is inquisitive and curious and is more than just a beast, a misunderstood beast.
Oh, look at that. Sounds like we need some more PhD or master students to study the, in hyena intelligence, and how fascinating that would be, really.
Oh yeah, there's an entire group at the University of Michigan with Kay Holkamp. She's been going for a long time studying. I mean, if you want to read papers on hyenas and their social behavior and social intelligence, and intelligence in general, there's dozens and dozens. There's so much research work that's coming out of East Africa, and unfortunately, in our area, there hasn't been as much going on, which is why when I came in to do my research, there really wasn't anyone else in the area that was doing hyena work. And it was quite cool to be able to step into a position and sort of completely just immerse myself in the species and fall absolutely in love with them and help in their conservation way.
It's amazing. And is there a message for us and all the viewers out there? Like, what do we need to do to help hyena? What's the kind of conservation action that's needed on the ground? I mean, apart from your research, of course.
Yeah, I think on the ground there's when it comes to large carnivores, the removal of habitat, the loss of habitat around the world is obviously something that is an issue for almost all species. Close to 1 million species are faced with extinction now due to climate change and other factors. There's so many pressures, and hyenas are luckily one of the more resistant ones. But when we start to see the decline of hyenas in certain areas, it really is a red flag. It's a red flag that we're actually coming to a tipping point in a certain way. And so, yeah, I think that on the ground in the wild, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on human-wildlife conflict mitigation. And that goes in part with what we're doing here with awareness of people actually understanding these animals and not just treating them like pests and vermin. And we see that in the areas that we work in where, there are that thought process is still there. People still think that they need to be eradicated. And they're incredibly important in the ecosystem. And I think that, as we mentioned here, with all their amazing abilities, they have their own right to live.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can hear it out here. It's because it's 7 p.m. here in New York City, so everyone's thanking the amazing nurses and doctors that are, on the front lines and risking their lives to help everybody here. So I want to say thank you so much to everybody who joined us live. We had a lot of hyena love tonight, and Jen saying that was her favorite animal. You know, we had a lot of amazing questions, and any we didn't answer, you know, live we'll be able to get to in your comments. So thanks everyone for joining. And if you actually as well, if you have suggestions for topics you'd like to hear, we'd love to hear it, so we can plan for more of these talks with everybody. So thank you, and we hope to see you again soon. You have some final words, Axel? Sounds like we're getting clapped. I'm like
yeah, I know. Well, first, yeah, clap to everyone that's working in the medical industry. But thank you so much for your interest in hyenas. It's not often that we actually get to put the spotlight completely on them, and I hope that in some small way you see that they deserve that. So thank you so much.
Thanks everyone, and have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.